lantern flame trembled in Cordell Hawthorne's grip as he crossed the frozen yard toward his stable. February wind cut through the Wyoming valley like a skinner's blade sharp enough to peel flesh from bone. The kind of cold that made a man's teeth ache just breathing. His horses were spooked. He'd heard them from inside the cabin, their panicked whinnying rising above the howl of the coming blizzard. Something was wrong. In 20 years of ranching, Cordell had learned to trust his animals' fear. They knew danger before men did. The stable door fought him. Ice had sealed the hinges. He threw his shoulder against the warped wood once, twice. On the third hit, it gave way with a shriek that scattered crows from the rafters. Cordell stepped inside, raised the lantern, and froze. There in the back stall, something massive moved in the shadows. Too large to be a man, too deliberate to be a bear. The thing shifted and lamplight caught its face. Golden eyes, wild, feral, staring straight through him. The creature's shoulders were as broad as two barn planks laid side by side. Dark hair matted with blood and snow hung past a face carved from stone in fury. Cordell's hand moved instinctively toward the Colt revolver on his hip. Then the creature spoke. "Come closer. I will tear your throat." A woman's voice, deep, broken by exhaustion and cold, but unmistakably human. Cordell held the lantern higher. The light revealed her fully now. She was enormous. 7 feet tall, maybe more. An Apache woman, her buckskin clothes torn and soaked through. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where iron shackles had been. The chains lay in pieces at her feet, snapped like kindling. Her back was pressed against the stable wall. Defensive, cornered. Blood ran from a gash above her left eye, pooling in the hollow of her collarbone. Cordell's breath misted in the frozen air between them. His fingers left the gun grip. "You are on my land," he said slowly. His voice was steady, calm, the voice he used with the spooked horses. "I do not want trouble." The woman's eyes narrowed. She watched his hands, waiting for him to draw, waiting for the violence she'd learned to expect from white men. Cordell took one step back, then another. He set the lantern down on a hay bale well within her reach. Then he turned toward the cabin. "Wait." He stopped, didn't turn around. "Are you hungry?" Silence, long enough that Cordell wondered if she'd understood English. He'd heard some Apache spoke it. Others didn't, or wouldn't. He walked to the cabin anyway, filled a wooden bowl with yesterday's stew still warm by the fire, added 2 thick slices of bread, a tin cup of water. He carried it all back to the stable, moving slowly, like approaching a wounded wolf. The woman hadn't moved, still pressed against the wall, still ready to kill him if he gave her reason. Cordell set the bowl on the stable floor, pushed it toward her with his boot, then stepped back. Way back. "If you want to eat." He turned and walked out, left the lantern burning, left her with food and light and the choice to trust or run. Behind him, he heard nothing. No movement, no sound. Just the wind beginning to scream as the blizzard rolled down from the mountains like God's own fury. Cordell stood on his porch staring at the stable door. Snow was already falling thick. Within an hour, the world would be white and blind. If she ran now, she'd be dead by morning. Frozen solid in some drift, another nameless body the spring thaw would find. He waited. Minutes stretched long. The cold bit through his coat, his shirt straight to the bone. Then he heard it. The scrape of wood on wood. The bowl being dragged closer. Cordell exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He went back inside his cabin, pulled the door shut, but he didn't bar it, just in case. Cordell sat by his fire, pretending to clean his rifle. His hands moved through the familiar motions, oiling the barrel, checking the action. But his mind was in the stable, with the giant Apache woman who'd somehow ended up bleeding in his hay. The war had taught him to recognize desperation. He'd seen it in the eyes of dying men at Shiloh, in the faces of freed slaves wandering the burned remains of Georgia, in his own reflection the day he'd buried his wife and daughter. That woman in his stable had the same look, the look of someone who'd survived the unsurvivable and didn't quite understand why. Outside, the blizzard hit with the force of a cavalry charge. Wind slammed against the cabin walls. Snow hissed against the windows like angry spirits. Cordell added another log to the fire. The temperature was dropping fast. Even inside with the fire roaring, he could see his breath. Nobody survived a Wyoming blizzard in an unheated stable. Not even a woman built like a mountain. Cordell stood, grabbed the spare blankets from his chest, pulled on his heavy coat, wrapped a scarf around his face until only his eyes showed. He pushed out into the storm. The world had disappeared. Everything was white and howling. Cordell couldn't see 10 feet in front of him. He knew the way to his stable by pure memory. 30 paces straight, 20 more bearing left. His boots sank into drifts already knee-deep. When he finally found the door, his hands were numb. He shouldered it open. The woman was still there, huddled in the corner. The empty bowl sat beside her. She'd eaten everything, even licked it clean. She looked up as he entered. Her hand moved to something hidden in her clothes. A weapon. Probably the knife she'd used to kill whoever had chained her. "Do not move," she said. Her teeth were chattering. The temperature in the stable was barely above freezing. "Was not planning to," Cordell said. He held up the blankets so she could see. "But you are going to die if you stay out here. That is a fact. I have survived worse cold. Maybe, but not tonight. Not in this." He jerked his chin toward the cabin. "You can freeze to death out here, or you can come inside where there is fire and more food. Your choice." She stared at him. Those golden eyes trying to see the trap, the lie. The cruelty she'd learned was always coming. "I do not trust you," she said. "Good, I would not trust me either." Cordell dropped the blankets on a hay bale. "But trust this, if I wanted you dead, I would have shot you the moment I opened that door. And if I wanted to turn you in, I'd have ridden to town for the sheriff hours ago." He started back toward the cabin, stopped in the doorway. "The choice is yours, but decide quick. In another hour we will both be too frozen to move." He left, walked back through the screaming white, made it to his cabin, pushed inside, slammed the door against the wind, and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Cordell put coffee on to boil, stoked the fire until it roared, laid out more blankets near the hearth. Then he heard it. Heavy footsteps on the porch, slow, hesitant. The door creaked open. The Apache woman stood in the doorway. Snow caked her hair, her shoulders. Ice hung from her torn clothes. She was shivering so hard her whole body shook, but her hand still gripped that hidden knife. Cordell gestured to the spot by the fire, said nothing, just pointed. She stepped inside, closed the door behind her, moved to the fire but stayed standing, stayed ready. Her eyes swept the small cabin, cataloging every exit, every weapon, every danger. "Sit," Cordell said, "before you fall." "I stand. Suit yourself." He poured coffee, 2 tin cups, set one on the hearth within her reach, took his own and sat in his chair by the far wall. Gave her space, gave her distance. They stayed like that for a long time. The wind hammering the cabin, the fire crackling, neither speaking. Finally, her legs gave out. She sank down by the hearth, not sitting, more like collapsing. Her hands shook as she reached for the coffee. She wrapped both palms around the hot metal cup, hissing at the burn, but not letting go. Cordell watched her drink, watched the color slowly return to her face, watched her stop shaking quite so hard. "There is stew," he said, "and bread. Take what you need." She looked at the pot hanging over the fire, then at him, suspicion and hunger warring in her expression. "It is not poison," Cordell said. "If I wanted to kill you again, there are faster ways." She studied him a moment longer, then reached for the ladle. She ate like someone who hadn't had a real meal in weeks. Fast, efficient, eyes never leaving him, even as she swallowed. When the bowl was empty, she filled it again, and again. Cordell said nothing, just let her eat. When she finally stopped, when her hunger was dulled enough to think clearly, she spoke. "You will not hand me over to them." It was not a question, but there was uncertainty underneath, like she was testing the words, trying to believe them. "No," Cordell said, "I do not sell people." "Why, because it is wrong," she laughed. A bitter, broken sound. "White men do not care about wrong when there is profit." Cordell met her eyes. "This one does." Outside the blizzard screamed, inside the fire burned, and between them something fragile began to form. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. The woman pulled one of the blankets around her shoulders. For the first time, she let herself relax, just slightly, just enough to close her eyes for a moment. "What do they call you?" Cordell asked quietly. She opened her eyes, considered him, considered whether to give even that small piece of herself. "Ayita," she said finally. "My name is Ayita." "Cordell Hawthorne." She nodded, then turned her face back to the fire. The conversation for now was over. Cordell let her be. He moved to the window, wiped frost from the glass. The world outside was nothing but white chaos. The storm would last through the night, maybe longer. They were trapped, together. Two strangers with nothing in common except the choice to survive. Cordell glanced at Ayita. She was watching him again, always watching, her hand still near that hidden knife. He understood. He'd been a soldier once, had learned that trust was a luxury you couldn't afford when men wanted you dead. You can sleep by the fire, he said. I will take the chair. I do not sleep. Then you can sit awake by the fire, but you should rest while you can. Why would I? Cordell looked out at the storm. Because when this blizzard ends, the men hunting you will start looking again, and we need to be ready. Ayita's eyes narrowed. Wibushi, you are on my land now, under my roof. That makes you my responsibility. He turned from the window, met her stare directly. And I do not let people get dragged off my property in chains, not while I am breathing. Something changed in Ayita's face. The hardness cracked, just for a moment, just long enough for Cordell to see the exhaustion underneath, the pain, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found shelter that wouldn't betray her. You do not know what you are offering, she said quietly. I know enough. They will kill you for helping me. They can try. Ayita shook her head slowly. You are a fool. Been called worse. Despite everything, despite the fear and pain and exhaustion, Ayita almost smiled. Almost. She settled back against the stone hearth, pulled the blanket tighter. Her eyes began to drift closed, fighting it, losing. Sleep, Cordell said. I will keep watch. I do not trust you. I know. But slowly, finally, she let herself sink into unconsciousness. Her breathing deepened, her grip on the knife loosened, just slightly. Cordell sat in his chair, rifle across his lap, and kept his word. He watched over her. This strange, fierce woman who'd crashed into his life on a night of ice and wind. He didn't know her story, didn't know what horrors she'd endured, didn't know why a dozen men would chain a woman and parade her across the territory like a captured animal. But he knew this. He'd made her a promise. And Cordell Hawthorne did not break his promises. Outside, the blizzard raged. Inside, two damaged souls found unexpected sanctuary. And in the morning, everything would change. Dawn came cold and pale. The blizzard had not stopped. If anything, it had grown worse. Snow was piled 6 feet high against the cabin walls. The windows were completely covered. The world beyond Cordell's door had become a tomb of white. He woke to find Ayita already awake. She sat by the dead fire, watching him with those unnerving golden eyes. How long have you been awake? He asked. I did not sleep. You were asleep. I saw you. I rested. That is not the same. She stood, and Cordell was struck again by her sheer size. She had to duck to avoid the cabin's low rafters. The storm has not ended. No, will not for a while yet. Then we are trapped. Yes. Ayita moved to the window, scraped frost from the glass with her fingernail, stared out at the white nothing beyond. They will wait, she said. The men who hunt me, they will wait for the storm to pass. Then they will come. Let them come. She turned. You speak as if you are ready to die for me. You do not even know me. Do not plan on dying, Cordell said. He stood stretched, the stiffness from his back. But I do plan on making sure you do not end up back in chains. Why? It was the same question, but this time there was genuine confusion in her voice, as if kindness from a white man was so foreign she couldn't comprehend it. Cordell moved to the fireplace, began building a new fire from the embers. 5 years ago, he said quietly, my wife and daughter died, smallpox. I was in town when it happened, buying supplies, trading pelts, useless things. He struck flint. Sparks caught in the kindling. When I came back, they were already gone. Both of them. Buried by neighbors because I was not there to do it myself. The fire began to grow. He fed it slowly, deliberately. I stood at their graves, he continued, and I made myself a promise. No more death on my land. Not if I could help it. Not if I could stop it. He looked up at Ayita. So that is why. Because I failed them. And I will not fail you. Ayita was silent for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it. I had a daughter, too. Cordell went still. She was 3 years old. She had my eyes, my mother's laugh. Ayita's hands clenched into fists. Cavalry came to our camp. They said we were trespassing on land that had been ours for 1,000 generations. They said we had to leave. We tried to run. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, forced the words out. She was running to me, calling for me. They shot her. She died in my arms. That was 7 years ago. Since then I fight. I do not feel I survive. The cabin fell silent. 2 people, 2 lost children, 2 different kinds of grief that somehow found common ground in a snowbound cabin at the edge of the world. Her name, Cordell asked quietly. Kaya, it means my older sister. Lily, my daughter, she was 6. They stood there, strangers bound by tragedy. And for the first time since Ayita had stumbled into his stable, Cordell saw her truly lower her guard. The warrior's mask slipped, just for a moment, and beneath it was a mother's grief that mirrored his own. I am sorry for your loss, Ayita said. I am sorry for yours. No more words were needed. They understood each other now, not as white man and Apache, not as rancher and fugitive, but as two people hollowed out by the same unbearable pain, trying to survive in a world that had taken everything that mattered. 3 days. The blizzard held them prisoner for 3 days. On the first day, they barely spoke, moved around each other like wary animals. Ayita stayed by the fire. Cordell tended to necessities, melting snow for water, rationing food, keeping the cabin warm. On the second day, Ayita's wounds needed tending. The gash above her eye had festered. Her wrists, raw from the shackles, showed signs of infection. Let me clean those, Cordell said. No. They will poison your blood if left untreated. I have survived worse. Maybe, but why risk it? Ayita glared at him, but finally, reluctantly, she extended her hands. Cordell worked in silence. He'd learned field medicine in the war, how to clean wounds, how to stitch flesh, how to keep men alive when death was patient and close. He heated water, added whiskey to sterilize, tore clean cloth into bandages. This will hurt, he said. Everything hurts. He poured the whiskey mixture over her wrists. Ayita's jaw clenched. Her breath hissed between her teeth. But she did not pull away, did not cry out. Cordell cleaned the wounds carefully. The iron had cut deep. Whoever had shackled her had not cared about her comfort or her survival. They'd chained her like livestock. Who did this to you, he asked. Ayita was quiet for a moment. Then she began to speak. I was scouting near Fort Bowie, alone. I fell asleep under the stars. That was my mistake. They came in the night. 7 men, bounty hunters. Cordell continued working as she talked, wrapping her wrists with clean bandages. I woke when I felt the rope around my neck. I fought, killed one, wounded 3 others. But they had chains, nets, things a warrior cannot fight against. Her voice grew distant, remembering. They paraded me through 3 towns, caged like an animal. People threw stones, called me savage, monster. They bit on me like I was a horse for sale. Cordell's hands stilled. They tried to sell you. $500 for a live Apache warrior. More if I was a woman. Even more because of my sin. Her lip curled in disgust. White men pay well for curiosities. My God, Cordell breathed. Your God does not care about my people, Ayita said flatly. If he did, he would not let your soldiers murder children. Cordell had no answer for that, because she was right, and they both knew it. He finished bandaging her wrists, moved to the cut above her eye. It was deep, would scar, but it was clean enough now. As he worked, Ayita watched his face, studying him like she'd studied the cabin, looking for the trap, the hidden cruelty, the inevitable betrayal. Why do you care, she asked finally. You could have let me freeze, could have turned me in for the reward. Why help me? Cordell met her eyes. Because it is the right thing to do. Right for who? For both of us. Ayita shook her head slowly. You are a strange man, Cordell Hawthorne. Been told that before. For the first time, Ayita laughed. A real laugh, short and surprised like she'd forgotten how. And Cordell found himself smiling in return. On the 3rd day, the storm began to break. The wind died down, the snow stopped falling. Through the frost-covered windows, they could see pale blue sky. Ayita stood at the window. Her hand rested on the glass. She looked like a prisoner watching her execution date arrive. They will come now, she said. Yes. You should let me leave before they connect you to me. No. Cordell says, no, he said again, firmer. He stood beside her at the window. We face this together, or not at all. You do not understand what you are risking. I understand perfectly. Ayita turned to face him fully. They stood close, too close for comfort, but neither moved away. If they find me here, they will kill you. Or worse, they will charge you with harboring a fugitive. You will hang. Let them try. You are a fool. You keep saying that, because it is true. But there was no anger in her voice now, just weary acceptance, and underneath the faintest trace of gratitude. I do not deserve your help, Ayita said quietly. Nobody deserves what happened to you. I killed 3 men during my escape. I am not innocent. Were you defending yourself? Yes. Then you did what you had to do to survive. That is not murder. That is justice. Ayita's eyes searched his face, looking for judgment, finding none. You are different from other white men I have known, she said. I will take that as a compliment. This time her smile was genuine. It transformed her face, made her look younger, less haunted. Cordell realized with sudden clarity that she was beautiful. Not in the delicate way men usually meant, but in the way a mountain was beautiful. Strong, enduring, shaped by time and hardship into something unbreakable. The moment stretched, neither quite sure what to say, what to do with this strange connection forming between them. Then from outside a sound shattered the quiet. Horses, multiple horses, coming fast. Ayita's hand went to her knife in an instant, every muscle in her body tense for battle. Cordell moved to the window, wiped away frost. His heart sank. 6 men on horseback, riding hard through the snow. Leading them was a man Cordell recognized, Cornelius Dutch, the most successful bounty hunter in the territory, and the cruelest. They are here, Cordell said. Ayita moved beside him, looked out. Her face went hard as stone. That is Dutch, the man who captured me before. I know him. He has brought others. 6 men. I can kill maybe 3 before they overwhelm me. You are not going to kill anyone, Cordell said. He grabbed his rifle, checked the load. Stay inside, let me talk to them. They will not listen to talk. Maybe, but I am going to try anyway. He started for the door. Ayita grabbed his arm. Her grip was like iron. Do not do this. Please, just let me go. I will run. They will chase me. You will be safe. Where would you run? The snow is 6 feet deep. You would not make it half a mile. Better to die free than in chains. Cordell put his hand over hers. You are not going to die, and you are not going back in chains. I promise you. You cannot promise that. Watch me. He pulled free, stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit him like a fist. His breath steamed. The snow was blinding white under the weak winter sun. The 6 riders pulled up 20 yards from the cabin. Dutch sat tall in his saddle. He was a big man, not as large as Ayita, but broad and thick with muscle. His face was scarred from a dozen fights. His eyes were the color of dirty ice. Cordell Hawthorne, Dutch called out. His voice carried across the snow. Friendly, conversational, deadly underneath. Hell of a storm we just survived. Dutch, Cordell said. He kept his rifle pointed at the ground, but his finger rested near the trigger. You are a long way from town. Tracking a fugitive, dangerous Apache woman. 7 feet tall, hard to miss. Dutch smiled, predatory. You seen anything like that around here? Cannot say that I have. That is funny, because we tracked her prints straight to your property 3 days ago, right before the storm hit. Lots of tracks come through here, deer, elk, could have been anything. Dutch's smile faded. Do not play stupid with me, Hawthorne. We know she is here, and you are going to hand her over, right now. Even if I had seen someone matching that description, why would I hand them over to you? Because I have got a federal warrant for her arrest, because she murdered 3 U.S. citizens, and because if you are harboring her, that makes you an accessory to murder. Dutch leaned forward in his saddle. That is a hanging offense, friend. Show me the warrant. What? You said you have a federal warrant. So show it to me. Signed by a judge, with proper seals. Dutch's jaw tightened. I do not need to show you a damn thing. Actually, you do, because this is my property, and I have got a right to see legal documentation before I let anyone search my land. One of Dutch's men, a thin scarecrow of a man with yellow teeth, spat tobacco into the snow. He is stalling Dutch. She is in that cabin. I can smell her. Shut up, Garrett, Dutch snapped. He never took his eyes off Cordell. Hawthorne, I am trying to be reasonable here, but you are making this difficult. All I am asking for is paperwork. That is reasonable. She is a savage killer. She does not deserve paperwork. Everyone deserves due process. That is the law. Since when do you care about the law? Since you showed up on my property threatening me. The standoff held, 6 armed men against 1. But Cordell did not back down, did not blink. Inside the cabin through the window, Ayita watched, her knife in her hand, ready to fight, ready to die rather than be taken again. But Cordell stood firm. Finally, Dutch straightened in his saddle. You are making a mistake, Hawthorne. A bad one. Would not be my first. We will be back, with the sheriff, with federal marshals, and when we find her in your cabin, you will hang right alongside her. If you can prove she is here, I will cooperate with proper legal authorities. Until then, you are trespassing, and I suggest you leave before I exercise my right to defend my property." Cordell raised his rifle, not pointing it at anyone, just raising it, making his position clear. Dutch's hand moved toward his gun, his men tensed. For a moment, violence hung in the air like a held breath. Then Dutch smiled, cold and patient. "See you soon, Hawthorne." He wheeled his horse around, his men followed. They rode back toward town, kicking up clouds of snow. Cordell stood on his porch until they disappeared, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he lower his rifle. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, from the knowledge of how close that had come to bloodshed. He turned. Ayita stood in the doorway, staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "You sent them away," she said, disbelief clear in her voice. "For now. They will return, with more men. I know. They will kill you. They can try." Cordell stepped past her into the cabin, set his rifle by the door. "But until then, you are safe here." Ayita followed him inside, closed the door. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then she did something that shocked them both. She placed her hand over her heart, a formal gesture. Apache, he thought, a sign of respect. "You risked your life for mine," she said quietly. "That is a debt I can never repay. I am not asking for repayment. In my culture, a life debt is sacred. You saved me. That means I am bound to you until the debt is settled. Ayita, I do not want. It does not matter what you want. It is done." She straightened to her full height. "You are under my protection now, Cordell Hawthorne, as I am under yours. We face what comes next together." Cordell opened his mouth to argue, then closed it, because he saw it in her eyes. This was not up for debate. This was honor, warrior's code, and it mattered to her in a way he could not fully understand but had to respect. "Together then," he said, "until the sky falls. Until the sky falls." They stood there, two unlikely allies, bound by circumstance and grief in a shared determination to survive what was coming. Outside, the sun was setting. The sky burned orange and red, beautiful, merciless. And in the distance, in the town of Red Valley, men were planning, plotting, preparing to return. The storm had passed, but the real battle was just beginning. 8 weeks later, morning came with the sound of hoofbeats. Spring had begun its slow conquest of winter. The snow had melted from the valley floor, leaving behind mud and the first brave shoots of grass. The passes were open. The world was waking. And with it, danger returned. Cordell was awake before dawn as he'd been every morning since the blizzard. Sleep came harder now. Every night was half vigilance, listening for approaching riders, for the creak of floorboards that meant Ayita was having another nightmare. 2 months had passed. 2 months of an uneasy truce with the town. Dutch had tried twice more to take Ayita. Each time Sheriff Wade had turned him away. No federal warrant had materialized. No marshals had arrived. But Cordell knew it was only a matter of time. He moved to the window, wiped condensation from the glass. A single rider approached through the morning mist. Young, skinny, moving with urgency. He recognized the boy before he could make out the face. Absalom Bridger, 12 years old and small for his age. Orphaned 2 years back when his parents' wagon overturned crossing the Snake River. The boy had been working odd jobs around town ever since, sleeping in barns, eating whatever charity he could find. Cordell had hired him a few times, found the kid honest, hard-working, hungry in a way that had nothing to do with food. There was a good soul in that thin frame, a desire to do right in a world that had done him wrong. The boy dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, ran to the porch. His face was pale, frightened. "Mr. Hawthorne," his voice cracked with urgency. "They are coming, Dutch, and maybe 20 men this time." Cordell's blood went cold. "Whence, Haboon? Now I heard them talking at Miss Tempe's saloon last night. They are riding out at first light with some kind of papers. They said they are taking her today, whether you like it or not." Behind Cordell, Ayita appeared. She'd been in the back room, the addition Cordell had built over the past weeks, so she'd have privacy. Space to be alone when the memories got too heavy. She wore one of his old shirts modified to fit her frame. Her hair was braided back in the Apache way. Her face was calm, but her hand rested on the knife at her belt. "How many men did you say?" she asked Sol. The boy startled. He'd only seen Ayita a handful of times, and her size still shocked him every time. But he was learning not to show fear, learning that size and danger were not always the same thing. "To 20, ma'am, maybe more. Dutch has been recruiting, promising shares of the bounty." Ayita looked at Cordell. 2 months of living together had taught them to communicate with glances. A whole conversation passed between them in silence. "We cannot fight 20 men," she said. "No." Cordell grabbed his coat. "But I know someone who might help. Saul, go to Reverend Zeke's house. Tell him I need him here. Now." "The Reverend, what can he—" "Just do it, fast as you can ride." The boy nodded, ran back to his horse. Was gone in a cloud of dust. Cordell turned to Ayita. "We need to prepare. If Dutch is coming with papers real or forged, the sheriff might not be able to stop him this time." "Then I should leave." "Where would you go?" Ayita moved to the window, looked out at the valley, the mountains beyond, the world that had been her people's home for generations before men like Dutch decided otherwise. "Into the mountains. Back to my people." "You told me your people moved south, past the border into Mexico. That is 200 miles through territory crawling with bounty hunters." "I have made it farther with worse odds." Cordell stepped closer. 2 months together, 2 months of shared meals and quiet evenings and slowly building trust. 2 months of something neither of them was quite ready to name. "You do not have to run anymore," he said softly. "I have always run, or fought. That is how I survive. Maybe it is time to try something different." Ayita turned to face him. They stood close enough that he had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes. Over the past 2 months, he'd grown accustomed to her height, had stopped seeing it as threatening, and started seeing it simply as part of who she was, beautiful in its own way. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "That we fight this the right way, with law, with witnesses, with truth. White man's law does not protect Apache. Maybe not, but it is all we have got right now. And there are people in this territory who believe in justice. We just need to find them." Ayita studied his face, searching for something, hope maybe, or foolishness. With Cordell, it was often hard to tell the difference. "You have a plan," she said. "The beginning of one. Does it end with both of us alive?" "That is the idea," she almost smiled. "You are still a fool. But I am your fool." This time she did smile, small, fleeting, but real. "Yes," she said softly. "I suppose you are." Reverend Ezekiel Moore arrived within the hour. He rode up on a mule, his black coat dusty from the road. He was a tall man, rail-thin with gray hair, and hands scarred from years of hard labor before freedom came. Zeke had been a slave in Mississippi, had the whip marks to prove it. When the war ended, he'd walked north until he couldn't walk anymore. Ended up in Red Valley by chance or providence. Started preaching in a tent, then in a barn. Now in a small church he'd built himself with donated lumber and sheer determination. He was one of the few men in town Cordell trusted completely. Zeke dismounted, took in the scene. Cordell standing on the porch rifle nearby. Ayita visible through the window. Saul watering the Reverend's mule with quick, nervous movements. "Young Saul said you needed help," Zeke said. His voice was deep, calm. The kind of voice that made people listen, made them believe things could be better. "I take it this is about the woman." "Her name is Ayita," Cordell said. "And yes," Zeke nodded. "May I meet her?" Cordell gestured him inside. The cabin smelled of coffee and wood smoke. Morning light slanted through the windows. Ayita stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. She was taller than Zeke by a foot, broader by half, but something in his presence made her wary in a different way than she'd been with other visitors, like she recognized something in him she hadn't expected to find. "Ma'am," Zeke said. He removed his hat, held it respectfully. "I am Reverend Ezekiel Moore. Cordell asked me to come." "Why?" Ayita's hand stayed near her knife. "Because I know what it is like to be hunted for what you are instead of who you are." He pulled back his sleeve, showed her his wrist. The scar tissue from iron shackles was identical to hers. Different chains, different masters, same cruelty. Ayita's eyes widened, just slightly. "You were property." "I was. For 38 years. From the day I was born until the day the law changed. Until good people decided that ownership of human beings was wrong." He pulled his sleeve down. "The law is not perfect, but it is better than it was, and it can protect you, if we use it right. I do not trust white man's law." "Neither do I," Zeke said simply, "but sometimes it is the only weapon we have." Ayita looked at Cordell, then back at Zeke, reading them both, weighing her options. "What do you suggest?" she asked. "Documentation, witnesses, legal defense." Zeke pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I took the liberty of drawing up a petition last night after Saul brought word of Dutch's plans, requesting that the territorial court review your case before any extradition or imprisonment occurs. It is not much, but it might buy us time." "Time for what?" To find you a proper lawyer, to gather evidence of the abuse you suffered, to prove you acted in self-defense rather than malice. Zeke looked at Cordell. I also sent word to someone who might help. Dr. Helena Finch, she is a physician trained in Boston, came west after she lost her license for treating black patients. Cordell nodded. He'd heard of Dr. Finch. The woman was brilliant, difficult, and completely uninterested in following social conventions that she considered unjust. What can a doctor do? Ayita asked. Document your injuries. Provide medical testimony about the torture you endured. Create evidence that cannot be ignored or dismissed. Zeke met her eyes. His gaze was steady, kind. The law may not care about justice for Apache people, but it does care about evidence, facts, documentation, and we are going to give the court so much evidence they cannot ignore it. For the first time since Soul's warning, something like hope flickered across Ayita's face. You would do this risk yourselves for me? Yes, Zeke said simply. Why? Because 20 years ago a white man hid me in his barn when slave catchers came through town looking for runaways. He did not know me, did not owe me anything, but he said nobody dies today. Not on my land, not while I can stop it. Zeke smiled softly, the memory still warm after 2 decades. I have been paying that forward ever since, trying to be for others what he was for me. Ayita was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Once. Sharp. Decided. Then we fight. Your way. Dr. Helena Finch arrived that afternoon driving a small wagon loaded with medical supplies. She was a woman in her late 40s with steel gray hair, pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that missed nothing. She walked into Cordell's cabin without knocking, looked at Ayita, showed no reaction whatsoever to her size or appearance, just professional assessment. Good Lord, she said, they really did a number on you. Ayita stiffened. I am fine. You are objectively not fine. Sit down. Let me examine you. I do not. Sit down. Dr. Finch's voice carried the authority of someone used to being obeyed, someone who had fought too many battles with stubborn patience to waste time with pleasantries. I did not ride 6 hours through mud and misery to argue with you. Ayita glanced at Cordell. He shrugged. The doctor was not someone you said no to. Reluctantly, Ayita sat. Dr. Finch worked in silence, methodical, thorough. She examined every scar, every wound, made detailed sketches in a leather journal, took measurements with calipers and string. Her face remained professionally neutral, but Cordell saw the tightness around her eyes, the anger she was controlling, fury carefully contained. 37 lash marks, the doctor said finally. She made a note, drew another sketch. These are not from punishment or discipline. These are from torture. Someone enjoyed this, took their time, made sure you suffered. Ayita said nothing. Dr. Finch moved to her wrists, unwrapped the bandages Cordell had applied weeks ago. The scars had healed poorly. Deep grooves where the iron had cut to bone. The flesh was discolored, damaged. These will never fully heal, Dr. Finch said. She touched the worst of the scarring gently. You will have limited mobility in your left wrist for the rest of your life. Chronic pain in cold weather. I'm aware. The doctor made more notes, then paused. Her hand moved to Ayita's abdomen, pressed gently, thoughtfully. When was your last monthly bleeding? She asked. Ayita frowned. 2 months ago, maybe longer. I do not track it carefully. After, everything my body has been irregular. Dr. Finch was quiet for a moment, pressed again. Different location? Then sat back. Her expression shifted. Not quite surprise, more like confirmation of a suspicion. Mr. Hawthorne, could you step outside? Cordell started to protest, saw the look on the doctor's face, left without argument. He stood on the porch with Zeke and Saul, the 3 of them silent, waiting. The spring afternoon was warm. Birds sang. The world seemed peaceful. Inside, Dr. Finch spoke quietly to Ayita. Cordell could not hear the words, but he heard Ayita's sharp intake of breath, heard something fall, a cup, maybe, ceramic breaking. Then silence. Long, heavy silence. Finally, the door opened. Dr. Finch gestured him back inside. Ayita sat by the fire. Her face was pale, her hands rested on her stomach. She looked stunned, frightened, almost fragile despite her size. What is wrong? Cordell asked. Fear clawed at his chest. Is she sick? Injured worse than we thought. No, Dr. Finch said. She is pregnant. The world tilted. Everything stopped. What? About 10 weeks along by my estimation, early enough that the signs are subtle. Late enough to be certain. Cordell's mind raced back. 10 weeks. That would be right after the blizzard. The night they'd huddled together for warmth. When boundaries had blurred and grief had sought comfort in another broken soul. When two damaged people had reached for each other in the darkness. He looked at Ayita. Is it yours? She said quietly. Yes. Cordell sat down hard. His legs had forgotten how to hold him. A child. They were going to have a child. Does this change things? Ayita asked. Her voice was carefully neutral, like she was bracing for rejection, for abandonment, for the cruelty she'd learned to expect from men. Change things. Cordell laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. Yes, it changes everything. I will leave. You do not have to. No. He stood, crossed to her in 3 strides, took her hands in his. They were huge compared to his, strong, trembling. We are in this together. Remember until the sky falls. Cordell, I am carrying your child. That makes this more complicated than... It makes it simpler, he said firmly. We protect each other, and now we protect this child, whatever it takes. Ayita's eyes searched his face, looking for doubt, for regret, for the moment when he would realize what he was signing up for and walk away, finding none of it. You are certain, she whispered. I have never been more certain of anything in my life. Something in her face crumbled. The warrior's mask fell away completely, and for the first time since they'd met, Cordell saw her cry. Not the silent tears of the night she'd told him about Kaya, but full racking sobs. 7 years of grief, 7 years of being strong, 7 years of surviving, finally breaking. He pulled her close, or as close as their size difference allowed. She leaned down, rested her forehead against his shoulder, and wept. I am afraid, she admitted, so quiet he almost didn't hear. So am I. What if they take me? What if our child is born in a prison cell, or worse? That is not going to happen. You cannot promise that. Watch me. Dr. Finch cleared her throat, the sound of someone giving them a moment but needing to move forward. If you two are done having your moment, we have work to do. They separated. Cordell wiped his eyes. Ayita straightened her shoulders, the warrior returning. But something had changed between them. A line crossed, a commitment made. What kind of work? Cordell asked. Legal defense, medical testimony, and figuring out how to keep a pregnant woman safe when 20 armed men want her dead or imprisoned. Dr. Finch packed her supplies with efficient movements. I will prepare a full medical report. Detail every injury, every scar. Document the pregnancy and its implications. This complicates things. How so? If Dutch arrests her and she is convicted of murder, they will not execute a pregnant woman. They will wait until after the baby is born, then hang her. The doctor's voice was clinical, but her eyes were furious. We need to make sure it never gets that far. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Cordell grabbed his rifle, moved to the window. Sheriff Clayton Wade sat on his horse outside, alone. His hands were visible and empty, unarmed as far as Cordell could tell. Cordell opened the door, did not lower the rifle. Sheriff, Cordell. Wade was a big man, 50 years old, gray mustache, tired eyes that had seen too much ugliness for one lifetime. Mind if I come in? Just want to talk. Depends on what you want to talk about. The woman, Ayita, and the fact that I have got a federal warrant for her arrest sitting on my desk. Cordell's finger moved to the trigger. Are you here to arrest her? I am here to warn you. Dutch finally got his paperwork. Real warrants this time, signed by a federal judge in Cheyenne. Murder charges for 3 U.S. citizens. Wade's face was grim. I do not have a choice anymore, Cordell. I have to bring her in. When tomorrow morning at dawn. And if I refuse, then I arrest you for obstruction of justice. And Dutch gets to take her anyway. Except then you will be in a cell instead of free to help her. Cordell lowered the rifle slowly, stepped aside. Come in. Wade entered, removed his hat respectfully, saw Ayita. To his credit, he did not flinch, did not stare, just nodded. Ma'am, he said, I am Sheriff Clayton Wade, and I am truly sorry for what I am about to do. Ayita stood, towered over him. You will arrest me. Yes, ma'am, tomorrow morning. But I am giving you tonight, and I am giving you my word that I will make sure you get a fair trial. Not a lynching, not a summary execution, a real trial with a real lawyer and a real jury. Why? Ayita asked. The same question she'd asked Cordell, the same question she'd asked Zeke. Testing, trying to understand. Wade met her eyes, honest, direct. Because I have been sheriff for 12 years, And I have seen innocent people hang because nobody cared to ask questions, because it was easier to assume guilt than to dig for truth. I do not know if you are innocent, but I know you deserve your day in court. Everyone does. He turned to Cordell. Get her a lawyer, a good one, and tell them to make a case for self-defense. Because if Dutch gets to tell his story first without challenge, she will not survive the trial. Wade put his hat back on, started for the door, paused with his hand on the frame. For what it is worth, Cordell, you are a good man, better than most in this territory. What you have done for her, that took courage, real courage. Wade's voice was quiet. This territory needs more men like you. Does not feel like courage right now. It never does, but you did the right thing. Protecting her, standing up to Dutch. That matters. History will remember it, even if the law does not. He left. The cabin was silent. Then Ayita spoke. I will go peacefully. Ayita. No. She looked at Cordell, at Zeke, at Dr. Finch, at Saul, who'd been standing quietly in the corner taking it all in with wide eyes. I will not bring violence to these people. You have helped me, risked for me. I will not repay that kindness with blood. But the trial, Cordell started. I will face it, like a warrior, with truth instead of steel. She placed her hand on her stomach, protective, determined. And I will fight for our child, but I will fight your way. With law. Cordell wanted to argue, wanted to say they could run, could disappear into the mountains, start over somewhere new with different names and a fresh beginning. But he knew it was useless. They would always be running, always looking over their shoulders. And a child deserved better than that. A child deserved a home. Then we prepare, he said. We have until dawn. Let us make it count. They worked through the night. Dr. Finch completed her medical report. 40 pages of detailed documentation. Sketches of every scar. Measurements. Clinical descriptions. Testimony about the systematic nature of the torture Ayita had endured. Evidence that could not be dismissed. Zeke drafted a legal brief, argued that Ayita had been illegally captured without proper warrant, that her killing of the 3 guards was self-defense against unlawful imprisonment and abuse, that she deserved protection under territorial law as a victim, not prosecution as a criminal. Saul rode to town and back twice, carrying messages, gathering supplies, being useful in the way 12-year-old boys could be when given purpose. And Cordell sat with Ayita, planning, preparing, saying things that might be their last chance to say. I do not know what happens next, Ayita said. They sat by the fire. Her head rested on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, an intimacy that had grown slowly over 2 months of shared space and shared danger and slowly building trust. We will figure it out, Cordell said. If they convict me, they will not. But if they do, you must promise me something. Cordell turned to look at her. Anything. Raise our child. Teach them both worlds, Apache and white. Do not let them grow up hating half of who they are. Do not let them be ashamed. You are going to be there to teach them yourself. Promise me, Cordell. He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. I promise. But only if you promise to fight, to not give up, no matter how dark it gets, no matter how hopeless it seems. I promise. They sat in silence, watching the fire burn down to embers, the night deepening, dawn approaching too fast. I never thought I would feel this again, Ayita said quietly. Feel what safe wanted. Like I belong somewhere instead of just surviving. Cordell squeezed her hand. You do belong here, with me, with all of us. For how long? Until the sky falls. She smiled, sad but genuine. Until the sky falls. Outside, the night sky began to lighten. Dawn was coming, and with it the sheriff. And after that, everything would change. But for now, in this moment, they had each other. And that had to be enough. Sheriff Wade arrived exactly at dawn. He brought 6 deputies, all armed, all looking uncomfortable about what they were doing. Cordell stood on the porch, rifle in hand, not pointed at anyone, but ready. I need to do this, Cordell, Wade said, apologetic but firm. Do not make it worse than it has to be. I know. Ayita appeared in the doorway. She had dressed in clean clothes, pulled her hair back. She looked calm, dignified, ready. I will come peacefully, she said, but I have one condition. Wade frowned. You are not in a position to make conditions. I am with child, 10 weeks along. She placed her hand on her stomach. Unmistakable. I will cooperate fully. But I need medical care, regular examinations, and I need to see the doctor if anything goes wrong. Wade looked at Dr. Finch, who nodded confirmation. All right, the sheriff said. You have my word. Monthly visits from Dr. Finch, more often if needed. And if anything goes wrong with the pregnancy, we get you help immediately. Ayita nodded, then turned to Cordell. She bent down, kissed him. In front of the sheriff, in front of the deputies, in front of God and everyone, it was a claiming, a declaration, a promise. When she pulled back, her eyes were fierce. Fight for me, she whispered. Always, he said. She stepped forward, extended her hands. Wade brought out the shackles. Cordell's vision went red. You are not putting her in chains. Cordell, she is pregnant. She is cooperating. You do not need to chain her like an animal. Wade hesitated, looked at his deputies, looked at Ayita, made a decision. He put the shackles away. All right, but any trouble and they go on. Understand? Ayita nodded. They led her to the wagon. Helped her up carefully. She sat straight-backed, unbroken, proud. As the wagon began to pull away, she looked back at Cordell. Their eyes met, and he saw in her face everything she could not say. Fear, hope, trust, love. The wagon disappeared down the road, toward town, toward a jail cell, toward an uncertain future. Cordell stood on his porch until he could not see it anymore. Then he turned to the others. Zeke, Dr. Finch, Sol. We have work to do, he said. His voice was steel, pure determination. That woman is carrying my child, and I will burn this whole territory down before I let them hang her. Zeke nodded. Then let us get started. Dr. Finch picked up her medical bag. I will contact every lawyer I know. Find someone willing to take this case. Sol stepped forward. Young, earnest, brave. What can I do? Cordell looked at the boy, saw the determination in his young face, the same hunger for justice that Cordell felt burning in his chest. You can help me, Cordell said, because we are going to need witnesses. We are going to need people willing to stand up and tell the truth about what happened to Ayita, about what Dutch really is. Yes, sir, Sol said. I am with you. Cordell looked toward town, toward the jail where Ayita would be locked away, toward the fight ahead. He had promised her. Fight for me. And Cordell Hawthorne always kept his promises. The morning sun climbed higher, the valley woke to a new day, and the battle for Ayita's life had truly begun. 3 days later, a stranger rode into Red Valley. His name was Atticus Bell, 65 years old with white hair and a face carved from weathered oak. He wore a suit that had seen better days and carried a leather satchel stuffed with legal papers and righteous anger. He tied his horse outside Tempe Caldwell's saloon, walked inside, asked for Cordell Hawthorne. Tempe, a broad-shouldered woman with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, looked him up and down. Who is asking? A lawyer. Dr. Finch sent word, said someone needed legal defense against impossible odds. Tempe studied him a moment longer, then nodded. Something in his eyes convinced her. Cordell's at the jail. Been camped there since they brought the Apache woman in 3 days ago. You will find him easy enough. Just look for the stubborn fool who will not leave until they let him see her. Atticus tipped his hat. Thank you, ma'am. He found Cordell exactly where Tempe said he'd be, sitting on a bench across from the jail, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the barred window on the second floor where Ayita was being held. Mr. Hawthorne, Cordell looked up. Who are you? Atticus Bell. I am a lawyer. Dr. Finch contacted me about your situation. Cordell stood. Can you help her? Honestly, this is not a winnable case. She killed 3 men. There are witnesses. There is evidence. A federal prosecutor will eat this alive. Then why are you here? Atticus smiled, thin, tired, but determined. Because 30 years ago I defended runaway slaves in Boston. Lost most of those cases too. The law was against us. Public opinion was against us. Everything was stacked in favor of the masters. But I won enough cases, saved enough lives. And the ones I won mattered more than all the ones I lost. He looked up at the jail window. Dr. Finch sent me the medical report. What they did to that woman was torture, medieval cruelty, and if we cannot get her acquitted, we can at least make damn sure everyone knows the truth about what happened. Sometimes that is its own kind of victory. Cordell extended his hand. When can you see her? Now, if the sheriff allows it. They went inside together. Sheriff Wade sat at his desk drowning in paperwork. He looked up as they entered, saw the lawyer, sighed bossy. Let me guess, you are here for the Apache woman. I am her legal counsel, Atticus said, and I am invoking her right to representation. She has not asked for a lawyer. She does not need to ask. I am offering my services pro bono, and territorial law guarantees her right to counsel. Wade rubbed his eyes. This is going to be a mess. Yes, sir, it is. The sheriff stood, grabbed his keys. Fine, 30 minutes. That is all you get. He led them upstairs, to the cell where Ayita was being held. She sat on a narrow cot, hands folded in her lap. When she saw Cordell, her face softened, just for a moment. You should not be here, she said. Where else would I be? She almost smiled, then saw Atticus. Her expression went guarded. Who is this, Atticus Bell? I am a lawyer. I am here to defend you. I do not have money to pay you. I am not asking for money. I am asking for your trust. Atticus pulled papers from his satchel. I need you to tell me everything, from the very beginning, and I need you to be completely honest, even if it makes you look bad, especially if it makes you look bad. The truth is our only weapon here. Ayita looked at Cordell. He nodded. She took a breath and began to tell her story. She told them about the ambush near Fort Bowie, about the 7 bounty hunters who came in the night, about fighting, killing one, wounding 3 others. She told them about the chains, the nets, the things a warrior cannot fight against. She told them about being paraded through 3 towns like an animal, about the men who bit on her, about the guards who beat her for sport. She told them about the first guard, Thomas Reed, how he'd come to her cell with intentions that had nothing to do with duty, about plunging the knife into his throat when he reached for her. She told them about the second guard, Marcus Brennan, the one with the whip, about strangling him with the very chains he'd used to bind her. And she told them about the third man, William Foster, the one who was running away, about hunting him down through the woods, about killing him to keep him from bringing others back. When she finished, the cell was silent. Atticus wrote notes. His face remained neutral, professional. That last one, he said finally, the third guard, that is murder. Self-defense does not cover fleeing victims. I know, Ayita said calmly. If you admit to that in court, they will convict you. Then I will hang. Ayita, Cordell started. No. She looked at Atticus. I will not lie. I killed him. He was running. He was no immediate threat in that moment. But he would have brought others, more chains, more torture, and I could not let that happen. She straightened. If telling the truth means I hang, then I hang with honor. Atticus studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. You know what, I think we might have a chance after all. How I just confessed to murder. You confessed to killing a man who was part of an illegal kidnapping operation, who had participated in your systematic torture, who, had he escaped, would have brought more armed men to recapture and likely kill you. Atticus leaned forward. We are not going to hide what you did. We are going to put the entire system on trial. Make them answer for what they did to you. Make the jury choose between their law and their conscience. That will not work, Ayita said. Maybe not, but it is the best chance we have got. And sometimes the truth is enough. Cordell watched the lawyer, saw the fire in the old man's eyes. The same fire he'd seen in Zeke, in Dr. Finch, in everyone who'd decided that Ayita deserved a chance. What do you need from us? Cordell asked. Witnesses, people who saw her condition when she arrived at your cabin, people who can testify to the bounty hunter's brutality and the illegal nature of her capture. Atticus packed his papers. And we need to prepare Ayita to testify, because if she takes the stand, she needs to tell her story exactly the way she told it to me just now. With truth, with strength, with no apologies and no shame. I can do that, Ayita said. Good. Atticus stood. Then we have a fighting chance. Not a good chance, but a chance. As they left the cell, Cordell lingered, reached through the bars, took Ayita's hand. I'm going to get you out of here, he said. I know you will try. I'll try, will. She squeezed his hand. Our child is fortunate to have you as a father. Our child is fortunate to have you as a mother. Sheriff Wade cleared his throat. Time is up, Cordell. One more squeeze. Then he let go. Walking out of that jail was the hardest thing Cordell had ever done. But the fight was not over. It was just beginning. The trial began on a Monday morning in late spring. The courthouse in Red Valley had never seen a crowd like this. Every seat was filled. People stood in the aisles, pressed against the walls, spilled out onto the street where they strained to hear through open windows. Half the territory had come to watch. Some came for justice. Others came for spectacle. To see the giant Apache woman who'd killed 3 white men. To watch her hang. Most came for both. Cordell sat in the front row, Zeke beside him, Dr. Finch on his other side. Saul sat behind them, his young face tight with worry and determination. The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Cornelius Bingham entered through the side door. An old man, 65 at least, with white hair and a face that had seen every kind of human ugliness the frontier could produce. He'd been a judge for 30 years. Fair, people said, but rigid. He followed the law without mercy or favor, which meant Ayita would get justice, or she would hang. Bring in the defendant, he ordered. Two deputies led Ayita into the courtroom. She wore simple clothes, a gray dress that Dr. Finch had provided. Her hair was braided back in the Apache way. Her hands were free. Atticus had fought hard to keep the shackles off during trial. She moved with quiet dignity, head high, shoulders back, unbroken. At 10 weeks pregnant, she wasn't showing yet. But Cordell could see the slight swell of her belly, the protective way she held herself, the way her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach when she thought no one was watching. The crowd gasped when they saw her, whispered, some in fear, some in awe, a few in something that might have been sympathy. Ayita's eyes found Cordell, held his gaze, drew strength from it. Then she sat, and the trial began. District Attorney Harold Voss stood to present the prosecution's case. He was a man in his early 50s, ambitious, sharp. He wore expensive clothes and moved with the confidence of someone who'd never lost a case he cared about winning. And he cared about winning this one. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Voss began. His voice carried through the packed courtroom like thunder. The facts of this case are simple, clear, undeniable. The defendant, Ayita of the Chiricahua Apache, murdered 3 United States citizens, Thomas Reed, Marcus Brennan, and William Foster. She killed them in cold blood while attempting to escape lawful custody. He paused. Let that sink in. Let the jury imagine it. The defense will try to confuse you. They will talk about torture, about abuse, about self-defense. They will paint the defendant as a victim. But the law is clear. These 3 men were federal agents duly authorized to transport dangerous criminals. They were doing their duty, serving their country, and this woman killed them for it. Voss pulled out photographs, crime scene images, the 3 dead men, bloody, broken, disturbing. Thomas Reed stabbed in the throat with such force the blade went through to his spine. Marcus Brennan strangled with chains until his neck broke. William Foster beaten to death while trying to flee for his life. He showed each image to the jury one by one. Let them see the horror. These are not the actions of someone defending herself. These are the actions of a savage killer who deserves to hang. Cordell's hands clenched into fists. Zeke put a steadying hand on his shoulder. Voss called his first witness, a man named Garrett, one of Dutch's crew. The scarecrow thin man with yellow teeth who'd been there when they'd tried to take Ayita from Cordell's cabin all those weeks ago. Mr. Garrett, tell the court what you witnessed. Garrett sat in the witness box, nervous, fidgeting, but he told his story with rehearsed conviction. We'd captured the Apache woman legal-like, had proper bounty warrants signed by a federal judge. She was being transported to Fort Bowie for trial on charges of murder and horse theft. But on the 4th night, she broke free while we was sleeping, killed Tom in his bedroll, killed Marcus when he tried to stop her, then hunted down poor Billy Foster in the woods and beat him to death with a rock. Did she have any reason to attack these men? No, sir. They treated her decent, fed her regular, gave her water, let her rest. She just went crazy one night and killed them all. It was a lie, every single word, but Garrett told it with conviction, and the jury believed lies more often than truth. Atticus stood for cross-examination. Mr. Garrett, you testified that the defendant was being transported legally. Do you have copies of these bounty warrants you mentioned? Dutch had them. Where is Mr. Dutch now? Don't know. Ain't seen him since we got back to town after the escape. How convenient. Atticus pulled out a document from his satchel. I have here a letter from the Federal Marshal's office in Cheyenne. They have no record of any bounty warrants issued for an Apache woman matching Ayita's description. No record at all. Would you care to explain that discrepancy? Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Must be a mistake in their records. Must be. Atticus stepped closer. His voice hardened. Tell me, Mr. Garrett, how much were you and your associates paid to capture Miss Ayita? $500 to be split among us. Who paid you this money? Private citizen offering a legal bounty. And did this private citizen care whether Miss Ayita was brought in alive or dead? Objection, Voss said smoothly. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Bingham said. Atticus nodded. Expected that. Mr. Garrett, you testified that Miss Ayita was treated decently during her transport, fed regularly, given water, allowed to rest. Is that correct? Yes, sir. Then how do you explain the extensive lash marks documented on her back, 37 separate wounds to be precise? Garrett's face went pale. I, I don't know about that. You don't know? You were with her for 4 days and nights. You didn't notice someone whipping a prisoner 37 times? Or did you just not care? Maybe she had those scars before we caught her. Medical testimony will prove those wounds were fresh when she escaped. Less than a week old. Atticus pulled out Dr. Finch's sketches, held them up for the jury to see. Detailed. Clinical. Horrifying. These are not old scars, Mr. Garrett. These are torture wounds, systematic, deliberate, inflicted while she was in your custody. I didn't do that. That was... Garrett stopped, realized his mistake too late. That was who Mr. Garrett, who tortured Miss Ayita while she was supposedly being treated so well. Silence. Damning silence. No further questions. Garrett left the stand sweating and shaking. The jury had seen the lie crack, seen the truth peek through. But Voss wasn't done, not by a long shot. He called witness after witness. Men who testified to Ayita's violence, her unnatural strength, her savage nature. He painted a picture of a monster barely contained in human form. A threat to civilization itself. Each testimony felt like a nail in a coffin being slowly, methodically sealed. Cordell watched Ayita's face through it all. She remained calm, unmoved, like she'd already accepted her fate and made peace with it. But her hand kept drifting to her stomach, to the life growing inside her, to the future she might never see. On the third day of trial, Atticus called his first witness. Dr. Helena Finch took the stand. She was sworn in with the same Bible that had sworn in the prosecution's liars, sat with perfect posture, met Voss's glare with ice-cold calm. Dr. Finch, Atticus began gently, you examined the defendant. Can you describe what you found? Extensive trauma to multiple body systems. 37 lash marks across her back and shoulders inflicted with a leather whip or similar instrument. Deep lacerations on both wrists from prolonged iron shackling. Evidence of severe malnutrition and dehydration. Several broken ribs partially healed. Contusions and bruising consistent with repeated blunt force trauma to the head, torso, and limbs. And significant psychological trauma consistent with sustained torture. She pulled out her sketches, passed them to the jury one by one. The drawings were clinical, detailed, impossible to look away from. The jury flinched. A few looked ill. In your professional medical opinion, Dr. Finch, how were these injuries sustained? Torture, systematic and prolonged. This was not punishment for misbehavior or restraint for safety. Someone did this deliberately, methodically, over the course of multiple days, with the express purpose of causing maximum pain and suffering. Could these injuries have been self-inflicted? Absolutely not. The angle and depth of the lash marks alone make that physically impossible. Could they have occurred during a lawful arrest or transport? No, these are not restraint injuries. Law enforcement does not whip prisoners 37 times. They do not shackle them so tightly that the iron cuts to bone. There is a clear medical difference between necessary force and torture. This was unquestionably the latter. Voss stood for cross-examination. He was angry now. This was not going according to his plan. Dr. Finch, isn't it true that you lost your medical license in Boston for unethical practices? I lost my license for treating black patients when the medical board forbade me to do so. They considered compassion toward non-white people to be unethical. I did not and do not agree. Some people in the courtroom nodded, others scowled. The territory was divided on many things. And isn't it true you have formed a personal relationship with the defendant, that you have spent considerable time with her outside of your professional examination? I have examined her medically and provided expert testimony based on that examination. If you're asking whether I think torture is wrong, then yes, Mr. Voss, I suppose that belief is deeply personal to me. A few people in the gallery actually laughed. The judge banged his gavel, but Cordell could see he was suppressing a smile. Voss tried again. You claim these injuries were inflicted during her captivity, but you have no direct proof of who inflicted them, do you? I have proof that they exist. I have proof they were inflicted during a specific time period. And I have testimony that the prosecution's witnesses were the only people who had custody of her during that time. The conclusion is elementary, Mr. Voss, even for someone without medical training. Voss gave up, dismissed her with barely concealed frustration. Next, Atticus called Reverend Zeke. The Reverend took the stand, told his story about being enslaved for 38 years in Mississippi, about the scars on his wrist that matched Ayita's almost exactly, about recognizing the signs of someone who'd been treated as property instead of a person. In your opinion, Reverend Moore, was the defendant's use of lethal force justified? Objection, Voss said. The witness is not qualified to render legal opinions. I'll rephrase, Atticus said smoothly. Reverend Moore, in your personal experience, as someone who was once held against your will, tortured and denied basic human dignity, do you believe a person in such circumstances has the right to fight for their freedom? Yes, I do. Any person being tortured, being held as property, being denied their humanity, they have not just the right but the obligation to fight for their freedom. That's not murder. That's survival. That's the most basic human instinct there is. Voss objected again. The judge sustained it, but the jury had heard it, and that was what mattered. Then Atticus called Cordell. Cordell stood on shaking legs, walked to the witness box, was sworn in with his hand on the same Bible his mother had given him before the war. Atticus kept the questions simple, direct. Mr. Hawthorne described the defendant's physical condition when you first encountered her. She was bleeding from multiple wounds, half frozen, barely conscious. She'd clearly been beaten severely and recently. I honestly thought she might die before morning. What did you do? I helped her, gave her food, shelter, medical care as best I could. Why being? Cordell looked at the jury, 12 men, ranchers and shopkeepers, and ordinary people. Because it was the right thing to do, because she was a human being in pain, and because I'd made a promise to myself after my wife and daughter died that I wouldn't let anyone else die on my land if I could prevent it. Did the defendant threaten you during this time? At first, yes, she was terrified, defensive, but she never actually harmed me, never raised a hand against me or anyone else in my presence. She was afraid, not violent. Why do you believe she was so afraid? Because men had hunted her like an animal, chained her, tortured her, sold her like livestock. She had every reason to believe I'd do the same, that any white man would. Atticus nodded slowly. One final question, Mr. Hawthorne. Are you the father of the defendant's unborn child? The courtroom erupted into chaos, people shouting, gasping. The judge's gavel banging like thunder. Order, I will have order in this court. Cordell met Ayita's eyes across the room. She nodded once. Permission. Trust. Yes, Cordell said clearly, loudly enough for everyone to hear. I am the father, and I intend to marry her, to raise our child together, to build a life together, if the law allows it. More chaos, more shouting. Judge Bingham threatened to clear the courtroom. Voss's face had gone purple with rage. Your Honor, this is relevant, Atticus said calmly. It establishes that my client is not the inhuman monster the prosecution has portrayed. She is a woman, a mother-to-be, someone capable of love, trust, and building a future. Someone worth saving. The judge considered for a long moment, then nodded. I'll allow it. But move on, Mr. Bell. No further questions. Voss stood for cross-examination. He was furious now, desperate. Mr. Hawthorne, isn't it true that you're only defending the defendant because of your intimate relationship with her? I'm defending her because she deserves to be defended, because what happened to her was wrong. You're biased. Your testimony is meaningless. I'm honest, which is more than I can say for the prosecution's witnesses. You'd say anything to save your savage whoredom. Cordell was out of his seat before anyone could stop him. Atticus grabbed his arm. Zeke grabbed the other. The courtroom descended into pandemonium. Judge Bingham's gavel crashed down like cannon fire. Mr. Voss, you will watch your language in my courtroom, or you will be held in contempt. Mr. Hawthorne, sit down immediately, or you will join the defendant behind bars. Cordell sat, shaking with rage. But he sat. Voss wisely decided he had no more questions. Cordell returned to his seat. Ayita's eyes followed him. Gratitude and fear and love all mixed together in that golden gaze. On the fourth day Ayita took the stand, the courtroom went absolutely silent as she was sworn in, every eye fixed on her. This giant woman, this killer, this mother-to-be. Atticus stood before her, gentle, respectful. Miss Ayita, please tell the jury in your own words what happened on the night you were captured. And she did. She told them everything, her voice steady and clear. No apologies, no excuses. She described the ambush near Fort Bowie, how she'd been sleeping under the stars when they came. 7 men with ropes and chains and cruelty in their hearts. She described fighting back, killing one, wounding 3 others. but ultimately being overwhelmed by nets and chains and sheer numbers. She described being paraded through 3 towns like a circus animal, people throwing stones, spitting, calling her savage and monster and worse. She described the men who bit on her, who discussed her like she was a horse or a piece of furniture, who debated her worth in dollars and cents. And then she described the guards, what they did to her in the 4 days before she escaped. The jury sat transfixed, horrified, unable to look away. The first guard was Thomas Reed, Ayita said. Her voice never wavered. On the 3rd night he came to where I was chained. He told me I belonged to him now, that I should be grateful he was willing to touch an Apache. He reached for me. Then she paused, met each juror's eyes in turn. I took his knife from his belt, and I put it in his throat. I would do it again. The jury flinched, but they did not look away. The second guard was Marcus Brennan. He had the whip, the same whip they used on my back for 2 days. When he heard Thomas die, he came with that whip raised. I grabbed the chains from my broken shackles and I strangled him. I would do it again. Her voice was like iron, unbreakable. And the third guard was William Foster. He was running, going to bring more men, more chains, more torture. She paused. This was the moment, the admission that could hang her. I could have let him go, but I knew what would happen if I did. They would come back with horses and dogs and guns. They would hunt me down. And this time they would make sure I never escaped again. So you killed him, Atticus said softly. Yes, I hunted him through the woods, and I killed him. With a rock, as the witness said. It was not fast or clean or merciful. Do you regret it? Ayita was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, every word rang with truth. I regret that the world forced me to choose between his life and my freedom. I regret that no one stopped these men before they could torture me. I regret that the law protects men like them and hunts women like me. She placed her hand on her stomach. But I do not regret choosing to survive. I do not regret fighting for my life, and I would make the same choice again if faced with it. Voss practically leaped to his feet for cross-examination. He was vibrating with barely contained fury. You admit you murdered a fleeing man in cold blood. I admit I killed a man who was part of an illegal kidnapping and torture operation. You weren't kidnapped. You were lawfully arrested under federal authority. Show me the warrant. Voss stopped. Excuse me? Ayita stood slowly. The deputies moved to stop her, but Judge Bingham waved them back. She towered over everyone in the courtroom, magnificent and terrifying and utterly unafraid. Show me the legal warrant for my arrest, the federal paperwork that made my capture lawful. Show it to this court right now. Voss sputtered. The warrant was in the possession of... It does not exist, Ayita said. Her voice filled the courtroom like thunder. Just like everything else you have said about me. Lies. All lies. You are a killer. Yes. Ayita's voice dropped, became quiet, deadly. I am a killer. I killed 3 men who tortured me, who bought and sold me like property, who treated me worse than an animal. She looked at the jury, at the judge, at every person in that courtroom. But you want to know what murder really is? Real murder, the murder you will not prosecute. Her voice rose again, passionate, furious, grief-stricken. Murder is what I described in my testimony earlier. What happened to my daughter Kaya 7 years ago? Cavalry soldiers shooting a 3-year-old child as she ran to her mother. That was murder. Murder is giving my people blankets infected with smallpox. Murder is taking our land, our children, our lives, and calling it manifest destiny. Murder is everything your government has done to my people for generations. The courtroom was dead silent. Not a whisper, not a breath. I killed 3 men who deserved to die. Men who kidnapped and tortured me. Men who would have done worse if given the chance. She placed both hands on her swollen belly. But your people have killed thousands of mine who did nothing except exist on land you wanted. So I ask you, who is the real murderer? Voss had no answer. The jury stared at her, some in shock, some in shame, a few with tears streaming down their faces. Ayita looked directly at the 12 men who would decide her fate. I carry a child now, half Apache, half white. This child will be born into your world, or it will be born into mine, into hate, or into hope, into the past, or into a better future. Her voice softened, became almost gentle. You hold that choice in your hands, all of you. Choose wisely. She sat down. The courtroom remained silent for a full minute. Then Judge Bingham cleared his throat. We'll recess for 2 days. The jury and I need to consider what we've heard. The gavel fell. 2 days felt like 2 years. Cordell wasn't allowed to see Ayita. Court orders. But he stayed camped outside the jail like he had before. Zeke brought him food. Dr. Finch checked on him. Sol sat with him through the long nights, asking questions about courage and justice and what it meant to do the right thing. What do you think will happen? The boy asked on the second night. I don't know, Cordell admitted, but whatever happens, we keep fighting. We never give up on her, never. Even if they convict her, especially if they convict her. Sol was quiet for a moment. Then I want to be like you when I grow up, Mr. Hawthorne. Brave like you. I'm not brave, Sol. I'm terrified every single day. That's what makes it brave. On the morning of the 5th day, they reconvened. The jury filed in. 12 men. Their faces were unreadable masks. Judge Bingham entered last, sat heavily. Arranged his papers with deliberate care like a man steeling himself for an unpleasant task. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood. A farmer named John Weatherby. Cordell knew him slightly. A decent man, fair, or so he'd always believed. We have your honor. On the charge of murder in the 1st degree for the death of Thomas Reed, how do you find the defendant? Cordell couldn't breathe. The world had stopped turning. Not guilty by reason of self-defense. The courtroom exploded, cheering, crying, shouting. Relief crashed through the room like a physical wave. Judge Bingham banged his gavel. Order, we're not finished. On the charge of murder in the 1st degree for the death of Marcus Brennan, how do you find not guilty by reason of self-defense? More cheering, more chaos. Cordell was shaking so hard he could barely stand. And on the charge of murder in the 1st degree for the death of William Foster. This was it. The fleeing man, the one she'd hunted down, the one that could still hang her. The foreman looked at Ayita for a long moment, then at the judge. Not guilty by reason of self-defense. Pandemonium, complete and utter chaos. Cordell was on his feet shouting, crying, not caring who saw. Zeke was weeping openly. Dr. Finch allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Ayita sat very still, like she didn't quite dare to believe it was real. But Judge Bingham wasn't finished. His gavel crashed down like thunder. However, the celebration died instantly. However, the judge continued, his voice grave. The defendant is still guilty of escaping federal custody and assault on federal officers. For these crimes, I sentence her to 3 years in territorial prison. Cordell's heart shattered. However, Bingham said again, and something in his voice had changed, softened. Given the defendant's pregnancy, the extenuating circumstances of her initial capture, and the compelling testimony we have heard regarding the illegal and torturous nature of her imprisonment, this sentence is hereby suspended pending good behavior. Hope flickered back to life. The defendant will remain under supervised house arrest in the custody of Mr. Cordell Hawthorne for a period of 3 years. She may not leave a radius of 50 miles from Red Valley. She must report monthly to Sheriff Wade. She will submit to regular medical examinations. Any violation of these terms will result in immediate imprisonment to serve the full remainder of her sentence. But if she complies, the judge looked directly at Ayita, and Cordell saw something like respect in those old, tired eyes. If she complies at the end of 3 years, she will be a free woman, truly and completely free, with all charges dismissed and her record cleared. He banged the gavel one final time. This court is adjourned. Miss Ayita, you are free to go. The courtroom erupted again, but this time it was pure joy. Cordell pushed through the crowd, reached Ayita just as the deputies were removing the last of her restraints. She stood slowly, looked down at him, and smiled. Really, truly smiled. He wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment. Instead, he just said, "Let's go home." "Yes," she said, "let us go home." They were married a week later in Reverend Zeke's small church. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. Tempe and Dr. Finch stood as witnesses. Saul held the rings, simple bands Cordell had hammered himself, from silver dollars, staying up 3 nights to get them perfect. Ayita wore a dress of elk hide and Apache beads that Tempe had helped her make, traditional but modified to accommodate her pregnancy. She looked magnificent, fierce, beautiful, exactly herself. When Zeke asked if anyone objected to the union, the church held its collective breath. No one spoke. Zeke smiled. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming and by the grace of God, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Cordell had to stand on a chair to reach her properly. Everyone laughed, including Ayita, especially Ayita. The kiss was sweet and brief and perfect. Or perfect. They were family now, legally, publicly, undeniably. And no one could ever take that away. 4 months passed in something like peace. Ayita's pregnancy progressed well. Her belly swelled with their growing child. Cordell's cabin truly became a home. They built a nursery together, painted it soft colors, filled it with handmade toys and blankets woven by women from town who decided that maybe, just maybe, an Apache woman deserved the same considerations as anyone else. Sol moved in officially. The boy had nowhere else to go, and Ayita had declared him family. "You are my son now," she told him one evening while they all sat around the dinner table. "If you wish to be." Sol had cried, nodded frantically. "Yes, ma'am, more than anything." The town changed slowly. Not overnight, not completely. Some people still spat when Ayita walked by, still muttered savage under their breath, but others nodded respectfully, said hello, brought gifts for the coming baby. Tempe started serving Ayita in her saloon without charging her. "Everyone's welcome at my bar," she declared loudly one night. "No exceptions, and anyone who's got a problem with that can drink somewhere else." Dr. Finch visited weekly to monitor the pregnancy. "Baby's large," she warned. "Your size plus his, plus the stress you've been under. It's going to be a difficult birth." Ayita just smiled. "I have survived worse than childbirth, Helena." But Cordell saw the fear in her eyes sometimes. The way she woke at night gasping from nightmares about chains and cages. The way her hand would drift to her swollen belly protecting the life inside even in sleep. He held her through those dark moments, reminded her she was safe, free, home. Then in late October, Cornelius Dutch returned. It happened on a Tuesday evening, just before sunset. Cordell had gone to town for supplies. Sol was with him learning how to bargain with merchants and carry himself like a man. Ayita was alone at the cabin, 7 months pregnant now, moving slowly, tiring easily, but still strong, still a warrior when she needed to be. She was making dinner when she heard the door open behind her. She turned, and there he was. Dutch stood in the entrance, older than she remembered, thinner, something broken in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You cost me everything," he said. Ayita moved carefully away from the stove, put the heavy wooden table between them. Her knife was across the room. Too far. But she had her hands, her strength, her will to survive. "I cost you nothing, Dutch. You lost what you never had the right to own. My reputation, my business, my life in this territory." He pulled a gun from his coat. His hand shook. "All gone because of you, because you wouldn't just accept your place. My place was never in your chains. Maybe not, but it's definitely in a grave." He fired. Ayita moved, fast despite her pregnancy. Years of warrior training overriding physical limitations. The bullet missed her by inches, shattered the window. Glass rained down. Dutch fired again. This one grazed her shoulder. Hot pain, blood, but survivable. She kept moving, circling, looking for an opening. He advanced, firing wildly, missing because rage had made him sloppy, because desperation had destroyed his aim. Ayita grabbed a knife from the table. Not her knife, a kitchen knife. But steel was steel, and she knew how to use it. Dutch lunged at her. They collided. Despite her pregnancy, despite her wounded shoulder, she was still stronger, still faster, still a warrior. She twisted, deflected his gun arm, got the knife against his throat. One push, one slice, that's all it would take. Dutch froze, felt the blade, knew he was dead if she chose it. "Do it," he whispered, eyes wild, broken. "Prove you're the savage they all say you are. Prove me right." Ayita held the knife perfectly steady. Her hand didn't shake, didn't waver. She thought of her daughter, Kaya, dead in her arms 7 years ago. Thought of all the violence she'd survived, all the death she'd dealt. Then she thought of the baby growing inside her, of Cordell, of Sol, of the home they were building together, of the future that was finally miraculously possible. She thought of what kind of world she wanted her child to inherit. "No," she said. She pulled the knife back, stepped away. "Let him live. Leave this territory, Dutch. Never come back. If you do, I won't be merciful again. This is your only warning." Dutch stared at her, disbelief in his eyes. He'd been so certain she would kill him, had practically begged for it. "Why?" he asked. "Why let me live? Because my child will ask me one day, did you kill when you didn't have to? And I want to be able to say no. I want to be able to say that I chose differently." that the cycle of violence ended with me. She lowered the knife completely. Now go. Dutch stumbled toward the door, paused at the threshold. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. Then he was gone, riding away into the gathering darkness. When Cordell and Saul returned an hour later, they found Ayita sitting at the table, the knife in front of her, blood on her shoulder from the graze wound, but alive, whole, at peace. What happened? Cordell demanded, seeing the blood, the broken window, the signs of struggle. She told them. Everything. You let him go, Cordell said when she finished. Not a question, a statement of fact. Yes. Why? Ayita placed both hands on her swollen belly. Because our child deserves to be born into a world where mercy is possible, where violence doesn't always win, where broken people can choose to heal instead of hurt. She looked up at Cordell. Is that foolish? No, he said softly, kneeling beside her chair. That's the bravest thing I've ever heard. He bandaged her shoulder carefully. Sol brought her water. They sat together as true darkness fell outside. Violence had come to their door one last time, and mercy had turned it away. It felt like a victory. 6 weeks later, in early December, the contractions began. It was just after midnight. Cordell woke to Ayita gasping beside him. Her water had broken. The baby was coming. Sol ran through the dark to fetch Dr. Finch. Cordell helped Ayita to their bed, trying desperately not to panic. It's too soon, she said through gritted teeth. I'm only 38 weeks. Dr. Finch said that's full term for a woman your size. The baby's ready, you're ready. The pain came in waves, relentless, crushing. Hours crawled by. Dr. Finch arrived with Tempe, then Zeke. The cabin filled with people who cared, people who'd become family. The labor lasted 18 hours. Ayita bore it like the warrior she was, gritting her teeth, refusing to scream until the very end, squeezing Cordell's hand hard enough to bruise bone. Push, Dr. Finch commanded as dawn broke outside. Harder. The baby's large. You need to push harder than you ever have. I can't, Ayita gasped. Yes, you can. You're the strongest woman I've ever known. You've survived torture. You've survived a trial. You've survived everything this cruel world has thrown at you. You can survive this. Push, one final scream, one final impossible push, and then a baby's cry filled the cabin. Loud, strong, alive. It's a girl, Dr. Finch said through tears. A beautiful, perfect, healthy girl. She cleaned the baby quickly, wrapped her in soft blankets, placed her in Ayita's trembling arms. The child was large, 11 pounds, dark hair like her mother, blue eyes like her father, strong limbs and a fierce cry that promised she would be a force to reckon with. She's perfect, Ayita whispered, staring down at the tiny miracle in her arms. Cordell looked at his daughter. This impossible gift, half him, half Ayita, all hope, all future, all possibility. What do we name her? He asked softly. Ayita looked down at the baby. At this second chance she'd never thought she'd have. At this new beginning born from so much pain and loss and somehow against all odds love. Nashoda, she said. It means second-born twin in my language, because I lost my first daughter, and now the spirits have given me a second chance. A second daughter, a second beginning. Nashoda Hawthorne, Cordell said, testing the name, loving it immediately. Welcome to the world, little one. You are so loved already. Outside, word spread through Red Valley like wildfire. The town gathered. When they heard the baby's cry, they cheered, celebrated, because against all odds, something beautiful had been born. Sol burst into tears of joy. I have a sister. Zeke blessed the child with ancient words and new hope. Tempe brought whiskey for the adults and candy for Sol. Dr. Finch stayed through the day and night, monitoring mother and baby, making sure both were healthy and safe. And in the cabin surrounded by their chosen family, Ayita and Cordell held their daughter, the future they'd fought for, the life they'd earned through pain and courage and refusing to give up. Together, 20 years later, a woman rode into Red Valley on a fine spring morning. She was tall, 6 feet, muscular and strong, with dark hair pulled back in a practical braid and blue eyes that missed nothing. She wore both Apache beads and Western clothes, traditional and modern mixed together without conflict. She carried herself with quiet confidence, the bearing of someone who knew exactly who she was and made no apologies for it. She tied her horse outside a building with a sign that read Dr. Nashoda Hawthorne General Practice. Inside her office, she treated a rancher's broken arm, delivered a baby for a nervous young couple, stitched up a knife wound for a cowboy too embarrassed to explain how he'd gotten it. She charged fairly. treated everyone with the same respect, made no distinction between white patients and Apache patients and black patients. To her, they were all just people who needed help. In the evening, she visited the cemetery on the hill overlooking the valley, placed fresh wildflowers on two graves side by side. Cordell Hawthorne, beloved husband and father, 1841 to 1901, he chose mercy over hate. Ayita Hawthorne, beloved wife and mother, 1847 to 1901, she survived everything. I miss you both every single day, Nashoda said softly, but I'm carrying on what you started, making the world you dreamed of. One patient at a time, one kindness at a time. She stood there for a long moment remembering, then walked back toward town. Past Reverend Absalom Moore's church where her brother Sol preached every Sunday about justice and mercy in equal measure. Past Judge Temperance Caldwell's courthouse where Tempe had finally been elected to the bench at age 60 and was known as the fairest judge in 3 territories. Past the statue in the town square, it depicted a tall woman and a shorter man, hands joined, facing forward together. The plaque read, Ayita and Cordell Hawthorne, 1876 to 1901, until the sky falls. They proved that love could bridge any divide, that courage could defeat injustice, that hope could triumph over hate. Nashoda smiled, touched the bronze hands gently. The future her parents had fought for was here. Imperfect, yes. Still struggling in places. Still growing. But here. Real. Possible. And it was beautiful.